TESOL Pop, Season 8, Episode 10. Hello and welcome to TESOL Pop, the mini podcast for busy teachers. My name is Laura, and joining me today to talk about choosing the right technology for you is Charlie from the popular YouTube channel Charlie's Lessons. Now, in today's episode, Charlie is going to share some of the technology he uses, along with examples of it in practice, as well as tips on how you can test to find the right technology for you. Before I get into today's interview, Haven and I are going to be exhibiting as TESOL Pop at IATEFL in Brighton this year. I'm also going to be giving a talk about recording instructional videos. So to find out more information about that, you can go to the show notes or go to the TESOL Pop website because we'd love to see you there. Now let's go to today's interview, where I started by asking Charlie about what technology he uses and why.
There's a core set of tools that I use every single day, obviously, and those tend to be within the Google suite of apps. But then outside of that, I'm also, when I'm speaking to teachers, I'm looking at a whole host of different technologies that can either help teachers in the classroom or help admin and staff in the school itself. So yeah, I'd say it plays a big role in how I communicate with teachers, with students as well. And yeah, while I do still have face-to-face contact with people, so people still do, parents and students, they still come into the school, and I'll often as well visit other schools, and so that's still traditional, I guess, in that sense. So I still have that personal touch with people, but yeah, to be honest, most of my day is, in some way or another, using technology to work, to develop my work, and my daily, my daily routine it always involves technology. Yeah.
You mentioned the Google Suite there, and I wonder if you could just give us a little insight into one or two tools that you're using day to day and how they serve you.
Yeah, I mean, on a base level, Gmail. I know it's not the fanciest technology out there, but it's. I think everyone has their own preferred email service. A lot of people prefer Outlook, or I even still come across people with Yahoo accounts. But yeah, Gmail is what I use to speak to people on a regular basis. It's not only the actual emails, but also Google has a chat service as well. Whereas if you've got a Google account, you can actually chat with people, which again makes it really simple to communicate with people just on the spot. And you can create spaces within those chat functions, so you can connect people who are in the same department together, and then you can chat with each other instantly. And also Google Drive, which is where we house everything that's ever existed in our school is on Google Drive in the form of a Word doc. Well, sorry, not Word, a Google Doc, I must say. Google Sheet or Google Calendar as well. It's all just, there's a lot more actually. When I start to think about it, it's a lot more than I can remember. But I would say Google Drive, Gmail, those are the two things that kind of interlink, and I'm constantly using those. So I know there's a lot more to the Google suite of apps than just those two, but I'd say those two are the biggest, yeah.
It's really interesting that you mentioned about the Google Chat feature. I've seen it, but I've never used it. But you just made me think that could be actually a really useful tool for my clients when I'm working with groups of podcasters.
Yeah.
At the moment, I'm using a supplementary tool. So I really should have maybe spent some time thinking about what I already have access to rather than finding another solution to add to my resource pack. I wanted to ask about AI, if that's okay, as a follow-up question, because there's a lot of excitement and fear, I would say, around the topic of AI. And I've been reading things about how we should be using AI more, and workers who do use AI are 50-60% more productive than their counterparts. But this is coming from the corporate world, these statistics and studies. These tend to come from people working in HR or marketing roles. And I wondered what your thoughts are, given that we are in this wave of AI, and how that may be used for you in your context and where you see it going.
When we talk about how teachers can use AI and whether that reduces the time spent preparing or in the class, in my experience, I think AI can definitely help you when you have certain students who have very specific needs. And obviously, I remember years ago when you start looking online for, I don't know, let's say you've got a student who's a chemical engineer and they need to improve, like the vocabulary related to what they're studying or the area they're working, and you search for books for students who are studying chemical engineering or to teaching English to students who are chemical engineers, nothing would come up. And I think what happens now with AI is that you can actually build materials that are designed for that specific need. And I think that's something that solved a problem, I think, in that sense. But I would also say that, when I'm trying to design activities for the classroom using AI, obviously a lot of the times you end up going to either ChatGPT, Gemini, or there's probably some others that exist nowadays, but these text generative sites. When you get it to finally produce a text or just some text that you are happy with, that's not enough just having it on there. You then need to take it off there and design it in a way that you're going to be able to take it into class. And so I remember just the other day building a quiz online, but then I had to import it into the site where I actually wanted to present it to the students. And to do that, I needed to format it in a certain way that the program could understand. And so I had to then, it took a lot of attempts, the various attempts at trying to get the text into a format that the other program could understand. And I think in that way, it probably took me just as long as it would have taken me designing it myself. So I'm not completely convinced that it's saving us a lot of time. I do think it is solving certain problems that we had before. But yeah, I'm yet to be convinced whether it's saving us as much time as people make out it is.
Yeah, it's certainly not the magic wand that it's been portrayed as by some advocates, I would say. It does take some testing and refining to get it to work for you. When you were talking about that kind of adapting it to the format, it's exactly the same for when I'm working with editing media, because there's a lot of AI tools in media editing now, but it's not going to do things perfectly. You still need that human touch of going through, checking things, adjusting things. Maybe the cuts aren't quite right, so you still have to kind of factor in that time. And I think that's a really important thing to convey to stakeholders who may not be using this AI, may not be creating materials, that this is the extent to which I can use it. This is how much time it saves me sometimes, but it's not going to reduce lesson planning time by whatever percentage. It is being said in other articles, up to 60% more productive, for example. There's always kind of a bit more conversation to be had there, right? Before we dive into that. With so many technologies and AI tools out there today, I know there's teachers thinking, oh, what should I use? How can I go about choosing the right one? And it can be really overwhelming. Certainly for myself, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to stick with what I'm using. I'm just going to leave it alone and hide. But I know to move forward, it's good to obviously try out new things. How can we go about choosing the right tech tools for us? Do you have any tips?
I think from experience, I've introduced tech to teachers and staff that has worked, but also I've had the experience of it trying to introduce tech that, while it seems to work fine sat at my computer in my office, when I've actually taken that into the classroom or taken it to present to other people, you start to realize its limitations. And I think when I after doing that a number of times, you start to build up a criteria. I think crudely speaking, the first thing I think about is the pricing plan. Is it free? How much is, because usually you get a few different options about what features are available. So I've got to take that into consideration. And what are the features that we need, and are those going to be included in a free package, or am I going to have to pay for it? And I think when you're working in a school, it can be, you really have to make a good case for certain technology for the school to invest in it, because that's quite, we don't, I think in general, schools don't tend to invest in many technologies. I think it's always better if it's free. So that's the first thing I look at. The second thing is, how easy is it to use? And you need to put yourself in the shoes of someone who has very limited understanding or knowledge about how technology works, and think about, would that person be able to use it? That's the key for me. I think again, mistakes I've made in the past when I try to push maybe new technology into a classroom or push technology onto teachers. It's because I've used it and I believe it's quite easy, but really, I've got a good understanding about how these things work, and I've used them for a number of years. So there are certain things I miss or I ignore, and for other people, those can be big obstacles to using it. And I think so. Think about how cost effective is it? Is it easy to use? And I think number 3 would be, is it actually solving a problem, or is it just another thing to add to the variety of tools that you might take into the classroom? I think there are certain websites which are doing a very similar job to others that you already have, and you think, well, what is it why am I bringing this in? Sometimes there is that novelty value to it. I think sometimes students respond well to that, especially if you use the same website a lot, of the time. I think a good example for that would be quiz sites. There's a million quiz sites nowadays where students can connect. I think each one is quite similar. So I think in that sense, do you really need to take that in? And also just other sites where other technology tools where they're trying to replace a more traditional activity that you would do in class, but it actually ends up taking up more time. Especially if I think again, like when we talk about the ease of use, I think it's not only from the teacher side, but from the students as well. If it's a technology that is going to require students to collaborate and work together, or to join, then that's something you need to think about. I think a lot of the problems that we come across as well is, do all your students have mobile phones? If they have mobile phones, that doesn't mean they know how to use them. And so that can often make what seems like good technology to bring into the classroom as actually not appropriate or not conducive for the learning environment. So I think, think about cost effective. Is it easy to use from the students and teachers side? And also, is it just another tool, or is it something unique? Is it actually, are you going to get your students to do something that they couldn't do before? So those are the kind of 3 things that are usually going through my mind. Yeah.
They're really helpful tips. And when you're talking about costing and the implementation, that's also part of cost, isn't it? Like, how much is this going to cost to implement and train people to use?
Exactly.
Because we can't just assume, because we're using mobile phones for social purposes, that it's going to translate that those users are also going to be able to use technology for educational purposes in the same way. So we need to factor in learner training, teacher training, and that's also added cost.
Exactly.
These are really good points to kind of think about. Charlie, it's been really insightful talking to you today. I would love for you to close today's episode by telling listeners where they can find out more about technology that they can use in the classroom.
Okay, well, obviously, they can come to my YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel, just search for Charlie's Lessons. I try to release a video at least a long form video, a longer video every month at least. And I'm always trying to look for technology that's practical, that I've seen being used. In that sense, I think teachers can get a lot out of the videos because it's something they can go away and use in wherever they're working. That's really my YouTube channel, is where everything's happening. Then obviously I've got my TikTok channel everything's under the same name. So if you're using Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Pinterest, LinkedIn, just look for Charlie's Lessons, and each one's kind of doing something a little different, but yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Charlie. And as always, those links are in the show notes, so you can find those easily. If you have a question that you'd like us to answer, or a topic that you'd like to pitch for TESOL Pop, then you can contact us via Instagram, Facebook, or the website tesolpop.com. Finally, you can support the work we do here at TESOL Pop by sharing today's episode with your teaching community, by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to the podcast, or by buying us a coffee at ko-fi.com/TESOL Pop.